Hi, everyone. Hoping you can hear me okay. I'm here for a few minutes to talk about this project, or some of our work that we're doing at Harvard Art Museums, right? So yeah, let's just get going. Hi, I'm Jeff. This is the museum I work in on the campus of Harvard University, and we have a collection of about 250,000 art objects. And we have an electronic catalog of those collections that resembles what I consider Swiss cheese. Solid structure, mostly where there's good curatorial interest, holes where there is not. So I'm going to talk about a new form of art cataloging and metadata creation we're developing. It's a form of cataloging with an emphasis on adding fuzziness, conjecture, and creative interpretation to our records. This idea of humans and AI working symbiotically on the creation of data, information, and knowledge. And just to be clear, this is very much a work in progress. Parts of our data pipeline and workflow are well established. For example, we have this longstanding part of our pipeline that when an image is added to our catalog, it's automatically, quote, looked at by more than a dozen AIs and supplemental services. And those AIs and services. And this is part of our data pipeline that is internally just known as the data grinder. The full output from all these AIs is appended to the catalog record with no vetting. And then about 24 hours after that, all of this data, including the full AI output, is made directly available to the public via our API. And as I like to say, no secrets here. The AIs do a lot of things with a fair amount of overlapping functionality between them, and that's really part of the point. They're all different attitudes, different vocabularies, different ethics, different corporate intentions, and such. And so, in the spirit of museum openness, all are welcome, good and bad. So we've been doing this for over 10 years, starting with general purpose computer vision services, eventually folding in large language models, including multiple versions of each provider's models. And again, we don't really discriminate how we apply them based on artwork type. So every image of every artwork is treated equally. So something like a more expressionist art object is treated the same as a sculpture and is treated the same as something purely abstract and so on. I think maybe you get the point. So to date, about 500,000 of our images pass through this pipeline, effectively our entire collection, multiple views of things. We're sitting on about 110 million or more synthetically generated descriptions, tags, features, and such. So just for the few minutes we have left, we're going to spend our time with this photograph in our collection. Right, so cataloging by humans took place in roughly the 2011 timeframe and basically resulted in this. So, nothing surprising there. Here's how the same information looks on our public website. Again, pretty standard stuff for museums. And, I would consider this to be pretty thin or Swiss cheese cataloging. Let's just take a moment and let's see what one of the computer vision services says. Again, this is a service with a limited fixed vocabulary, not a verbose modern LLM. And we get things like this. Even-toed ungulate, bookend it with things like horizontal and cute and pork. Let's just have a moment to see how the language of the curator compares with the language of the AI, even on this very, very small scale. And I think it doesn't take but a second to realize indeed there is a small overlap. And here, this is just enough to build a bridge and to extend a hand and for us to stand on common but slightly different ground. And then just looking at the data a slightly different way, again, I think it's a short leap to recognize that the AI both enriches and extends the curator's facts. It's not a competition, but a lovely melding. And so what if we had many AIs look at this one photograph? How do they diverge from what the curatorial baseline of who, what, where, when, how, and why? Here's a small sampling of terms from across a dozen plus AIs. The term event is in fact mentioned 13 times across 8 separate AIs. Something like county fair shows up 3 times from 3 different AIs. And then even terms like livestock show turned up 5 times from 5 different AIs. And digging slightly deeper, we can see the AIs dare to wade into emotion as well. Which leads me to offering you a sample full sentence one AI used to describe this photograph. Quote, the scene seems to be captured at a moment of pride and connection with agriculture, likely at a county fair or similar event. And this, in turn, brings us to a point where we can start to understand why one might allow AI synthetic data into our catalogs to free humans from the risk of misspeaking and misinterpretation by ascribing to AI the fuzzy ideas, the unprovable and unknowable things for the sake of creating a more expansive and inclusive experience with our collections. Or to put it another way, AI can give us new ways to enable personal connections to art. Or to put it yet another way, museums are really good at creating singular paths to connecting visitors with art. AI gives us new ways to find personal connections to art, both direct and indirect. And so there's another point tucked in here, which is that we can use AIs to steer attention. Here's another sentence from a different AI description. Quote, the pig is seen grazing on the ground and there are additional animals visible in nearby pens. So I used this photograph in research for nearly 12 years. I didn't realize or see the other animals in the pens until I read that AI description earlier this year. Like, I feel kind of silly for having missed them for so many years, but my focus typically has been on the boy with the pig, right? So this parallels a general challenge with art museums. When curators describe art and write the labels that go on the walls of museums, they are deliberately steering your attention to what they deem are the most important things for you to see, but that doesn't mean they are the only things to see. And so here's the actual co-creation workflow we're working out. Again, an image enters our catalog. It's both handed off to the AIs via this data grinder pipeline we have and handed off to the human. You know, it could be one curator, could be, a curator plus one of our curatorial fellows. The AIs generate a lot of raw data, and that stuff directly goes into our catalog, as I mentioned, unvetted. The expert generated data likewise goes into our catalog. But then in the upper right, something else happens where the AI, all of those dozen or more AIs, go into this pool for fuzzy summarization. And then eventually, this group think component kicks in where it's taking into account the expert testimony evaluated against AI thoughts to then propose amendments to the record. Basically, we think these records would benefit from ... or we see these gaps in your cataloging and your record would benefit from ... And then, of course, there's a moment for review and reflection where one might accept straight up what an AI suggests, accepts with modifications, or rejects. And here's one of the other key components, right? Everything that goes into the catalog, everything goes into the catalog, noting status and remarks, even the rejected proposals, right? So there's data provenance designed to be in this workflow at every step of the way, especially as models evolve and cultural norms change. What might we have missed, both on the human side and the AI side, as time marches forward? And I'll basically leave you with an incredibly rudimentary example of what fuzzy summarization could propose based on simply the face detection information from a suite of AIs. There are many places, so many AIs doing people and face detection. We could do some really super basic summarization and guesswork. And of course, there are many places proposed amendments could land in the catalog: image alt text, image descriptions, object descriptions, indexing for search, indexing for discovery, co-authored original opinion, counter speculation, and ideas for future study. So we're slowly working on bringing our two worlds together, the AI and the curatorial, and finding a happy medium where we can work peacefully. So thanks for listening.
So you can post any questions on the Slack, and hopefully we can pick them up. So we'll move on now to Matt and Abbey, and then we'll come back and do Q&A at the end. Okay, so Matt and Abbey.
Okay. Hello. Very nice to be here. Okay, I'm Abbey Potter. I'm from the Library of Congress, and this is Matt McGrattan. He's from Digerati.
I know.
And we worked together on over the last 3 years on this project. We're going to talk about trying to investigate how we could use AI in the cataloging workflow at the Library of Congress. So we'll first start out here. So at the Library of Congress, we've been thinking about machine learning and AI for several years. I think in 2019, we had the summer of machine learning, and that turned to be much longer, much longer. We're still there. And in the midst of our sort of experimentation, the ChatGPT 3.5 or whatever came out in the middle of it. So this was sort of starting, we're going to start way back in the beginning. But so when we were first looking at machine learning, we were looking at it in terms of how it could increase sort of computational access to our collections. We had put all this effort into digitizing our collections, put them online. We wanted to do more with them, get more value out of them. So that's sort of where this all began, because we sort of saw the lack of item level metadata as a real barrier to doing computational things with our collection. So but we first started investigating machine learning at the time, and then into AI because of that kind of problem. But and from about that time is when we came up with this sort of three kind of element of AI, and we wanted to look at, sort of understand each of these pieces: the data, the model, the people, and sort of understand, what if these, what combination of these elements makes AI work for us, or what, what things can we improve on or change to make the performance better or to make the implementation better. So I won't go into all of this, but this was sort of a starting point for our sort of AI explorations. And we've done other experiments with Digerati and independently with through other programs with AI machine learning. And through all of that, we've come up with this planning framework. So the idea for this planning framework is at the Library of Congress. It's a large organization. It's got the Congressional Research Service. It's got the Copyright Office. It's got the library part of the library, which is actually like 8 or 9 libraries stuck together with special collections, and we also have a museum, and we have exhibits, and so we have lots of different kinds of use cases. So we wanted to give staff guidance on how to walk through decisions, how to understand the new technology, and that's where this framework came from. We put this framework online. You can find it. It's on GitHub, and we shared it there because we want people to try it out and use it. There's worksheets, there's sort of workshops and things that are kind of make the activities that you do together to work through it. And there's a poster that I'm doing over lunch that has more about this if you're interested in that. Okay. So, but this project was sort of going through that whole process, all the phases of the framework. This was one of the first ones that sort of helped build that framework and work it out. Okay, so We called the project Exploring Computational Description, and we sort of put it out for bid in 2021, and then it was awarded in, I think, September of 2021, and then that's when it started out. So, and we wanted to understand what AI methods could help us with cataloging. We had some core principles of supporting the cataloger, so we want to help this group of our staff. We're not trying to skip over them or replace them, but sort of give them better tools and better workflows to deal with the real challenges that they have. They have backlogs, they have different data sources that they have to work in. They have, we have 20,000 analog books coming in every month. It's a serious workflow and sort of the backbone to a lot of the other workflows at the library. So it's a high priority workflow. So we wanted to support our staff and involve them in all ways, and then also maintain the quality of our records. We don't want to lower the quality of our records. We want to maintain the quality. And another way, and Matt will sort of get into the details of everything we tested, but we really wanted to test multiple models, multiple approaches, and that has been really, really valuable in understanding this, the whole kind of AI environment, because there's meaningful differences in the tools and what the outputs are. So it's really important to test multiple tools. Okay, so Matt will go into the ECD 2 and 3, but there's sort of slight differences of them all, but they're basically done over 3 years. And I'll pass it over to you. Okay.
Hi. So yeah, hopefully, I'll try and summarize this as quick as I can. We can think of the kind of automated cataloging processes involving kind of maybe 5 tasks: extracting data from the books, classifying books, linking the data to the appropriate kind of control vocabularies, which is obviously really important, normalizing the data that you're getting out to follow the appropriate cataloging standards and rules, and then serializing all that data back out in a form that can be then absorbed into cataloging tools and elsewhere. The 3 phases, I'm not going to go into detail, of the ECD experiments were all iterating towards something slightly closer to a real-world cataloging workflow, more challenging data, more requirements around adhering to standards, using control vocabularies, and so on. And the workflows were essentially closer to something like a real-world workflow. So we generated metrics for all of these. We had ground truth data for everything. I won't go through all of the metrics that we had, but we also did a round of subject review. So when we predicted LCSH subjects for books, they were then reviewed by expert reviewers for whether they were acceptable, too broad, too narrow, wrong, etc. So there's a mixture of machine evaluation and manual review. The data was digitized books with catalog records, and we converted some of them to BibFrame, or we had BibFrame already. The metrics today are from the Select Digitized Books data package that's published by the library. You can see the range of the material in this graph and the type of material. So we tested a whole range of approaches. Text extraction using kind of standard NLP. So we started this work before all the kind of GPT, LLM wave. We were using small transformer models. We also then use large language models, a mixture of open weights or open source self-hosted models, and some commercial closed source the big SaaS services, but also some kind of rule-based approaches. Some fields and some data are quite amenable to just using kind of traditional programming methods. We tried all different prompting strategies, and we also fine-tuned using both a mixture of open weight models that we fine-tuned on infrastructure that we controlled, but also some SaaS services like OpenAI's and Mistral's. We also applied some simple normalization to the data. We did entity linking using kind of RAG-based approaches. There's a whole range of them, but trying to match the predicted data to control vocabularies. That was both subjects and names for people or publishers, and matching both on kind of orthographic similarity, semantic similarity, doing re-ranking with LLMs. So the outputs were then sorted to try and predict the best match, and then return that as part of the catalog record. The same as subject classification, we tried a whole range of approaches, existing tools like ANIF, using RAG, LLM prediction, and so on. And then there were human-in-the-loop interfaces where we presented that data to the end user and then asked them to do different kinds of evaluation and tested the ways in which machine-predicted records could then help them in their workflow. I'm going to skip ahead to the kind of performance. So on the subject review, around 43% that were manually reviewed were judged to be acceptable as is. About 22% were too broad and 5% were too narrow. And about one-third, slightly less than one-third, were judged to be irrelevant or not the correct subject for this thing. When we're looking at historic books, accuracy for most fields is around 70 to 80%, but on modern material, it was often much higher. We also tested training models on out-of-copyright historic books and then evaluating them on open modern books, which also resulted in quite a big improvement. So 95% plus accuracy on core bibliographic metadata on the modern books. For subjects, our best approaches used a kind of RAG approach where we used the document text to find other books and then predicted from those what the subject should be. Accuracy is around 23%, but that's slightly misleading because we predicted more subjects for the books than were actually in the catalogue record. So there's a kind of natural ceiling to that. Around half the books, we got all of the subjects that were in the catalogue record, so about 50%. So the overall accuracy is summarised here, 80% across all fields, 90 plus, getting close to 100 on certain core fields, below 50 on subject and genre, but those are challenging. There's 400,000 LCSH subject headings, so it's quite hard to match. There are some questions. I don't want to hand you back to you, Abbey.
Yeah, these are questions based from one of the managers from the cataloging section. These are her questions. They're very focused on cataloging sort of policy, which I think moves into this kind of area because this is a kind of rubric we're trying to use when we look at different AI experiments that we do to determine what to prioritize. So we've, the experiments that we just talked about, and most of our experiments are kind of in this iterative box where we haven't quite met our quality standards. So for this cataloging experiment, the results are such that there needs to be a human in the loop. It's not good enough for a fully automatic process. But it also points to different areas of cataloging policy around how we use LCSH, when in the workflow, and who does different cataloging steps. Those are questions that are sort of not technical questions. These are internal policy questions that I think will be able to push us more into a successful sort of implementation of this kind of workflow, and we're going for something more transformative. So this is, like I said, this is a key workflow to our mission, and it also has a lot of challenges. So we want to continue working on this. This next year, we're doing a more internal study. So catalogers have been involved the whole time, but now we're sort of taking a wider step to look at other workflows that would be impacted, and are looking at, if all goes well, implementation in the next, in FY27 perhaps. So that, I think, is it.
Thank you. So we've got time for questions for Matt and Abbey. Any questions in the room? Yes, there's one here.
Hi, Antoine Isaac from Europeana. I think I've got a question for everyone, actually. You're working pretty much on the same topic, and it's really great stuff. So you're thinking of including those results of AI analysis within your workflow and your indexes. But you're also institutions that publish data that can be reused by others. I suppose you have APIs and stuff like that. Are you also thinking of including those enrichments in the data that you would share downstream?
Yes. The one thing we didn't really talk about is how we would express in the MARC or BibFrame file what fields were generated by AI, you know, what model and all that. So that was part of the experiment. We're continuing to look at that. And it's just sort of the data provenance questions overall, especially if we make data outside of the catalog sort of publicly available for, you know, reuse. That's definitely something we're looking into.
Right, and Jeff, are you with us? Do you want to pick that up?
I guess as I mentioned, right, like if you go to our public API right now, there's an endpoint called annotations, and that's where all of the AI stuff is. And it's, every record you find in that endpoint is like a description or a tag, and some of the accompanying fields are like the name of the service, the name of the model, the version, if we have that information, the date, timestamp. So that stuff is there. And yeah, for me and from the art museum perspective, is very much intending to just make all parts of this available through our various digital venues.
Great, thank you. And yes, a question here.
Sorry, there was one here first.
Ah, right, okay.
Sorry. Thank you for the very interesting presentations. From what I can see, the metadata generated by AI or LLMs is somewhat more descriptive. And given that the examples are mainly Northern American, I was wondering to what extent either the open AI with the spacing would be helpful in not censoring, and if these texts in the metadata are so much more descriptive, to what extent will the curators need to censor them given the current US policy?
Well, I think the you know, the bias in training data is definitely something we're aware of and looking for, and I think there's we also look at studies about you know, just existing human bias in, you know, catalogers agreeing with other catalogers about what the right cataloging term should be. There's not even agreement there, so it's a hard thing to sort of measure exactly, and we have always relied on our trained catalogers to make these decisions, and they're not always right, but that's what we've done. So, and I think that's what we will continue to do, you know, and we try to. There's long, you know, I'm sure we'll hear about later the sort of efforts to look at these terms over time, and I think one of the big things that I'm hopeful about is putting more sort of the subject cataloging was flagged when we started working with the catalogers as that's the hardest thing for us to do. That's the most time consuming, and if we could, you know, make progress with them on how to make it better, and also do work with communities and users to work on that together, I think that would be a great outcome of this work.
Right. We'll move on.
Thank you. My name is Yves Mora from the National Library of Luxembourg. I have a question for Abbey. Do you think that it's worthwhile to explore questions among catalogers, whether the AI-generated metadata should be taken at the same standard, or it's like whether there should be a different standard? Because I think what the example from Harvard shows really well is that it's complementary. It's like, do you also have that for basic metadata?
Well, I think we've, one of the early studies we did was sort of doing more user research, not necessarily catalog data, but metadata that people are looking for, general users, not necessarily researchers, but general users of digital content. And I think there's nothing really definitive, but one of the main takeaways from that research was that a lot of the sort of descriptive things don't make sense to sort of general users, especially things about formats and types of photography, and you know, that is hard for general users to understand. So from that, I just sort of take you know, I like the approach here where there's as much as possible and clearly very transparent where it came from, then people can sort of decide for themselves what they think. I think we have to, though, think of it carefully, because data that comes from the Library of Congress, people will generally believe is true. So that's something we it's tricky, and we are working through it.
So I appreciate we may have more questions, but we've sadly run out of time. So we're now going to move into the lunch break. And during lunch, the posters will be presented. So there's 10 posters in the Bronte room, so please make time to go and see them. And if you're one of the poster presenters, please go in advance for your lunch into the Chaucer room. And then lunch will be served in 2 locations, so in the main bar area, and then once the poster people have their lunch in the Chaucer room. So please thank both sets of presenters in this session. Thank you.